we're going to start with the check-in. See how everybody's feeling today. So if you would scan that QR code with your smartphone, it'll be easier to do the Mentimeter check-in with us if you're doing it on a separate device, and it'll be perfect on a smaller screen. So if you'll scan that code, just open the camera on your smartphone. Pretty much all smartphone cameras can just scan those QR codes and take you where you need to go now. There's also a link. If you'd prefer to put a link into a different tab, you can do that. And it should be asking you for some words to describe how you're feeling today. I'll participate too. We'll give everybody a minute to share some of their words and get that QR code. I'll put the link in the chat if you want to just have a direct link to that Mentimeter. I'm feeling happy today. All right, I'm gonna switch screens so you can see our results. Feeling tired, excited, hot. This feels like the first real week of summer. Is anyone else feeling that? I don't know about y'all, but I have been having to get up very early to take my dog on a walk because it's feeling like real summer in Arkansas this week, for sure. What else you got? You can answer that question more than once. So if you want to put in some more words, you can. The biggest words in the word cloud are the ones we've repeated. So we got multiple people feeling excited, relaxed. Something I like about Mentimeter is you can enter emojis. So like I put in that little smiley face. I think that makes for a fun check-in with kids, especially our young learners, but all of our students, because sometimes an emoji is an easier way to describe how we're feeling than words. So if you want to play around with that, find an emoji that represents how you're feeling today. You can enter that so you can see what it looks like. We'll give it about 60 more seconds, and then I have one more check-in question for you. I think excited got a little bigger. I also think tired got a little bigger. I'll enter another emoji so you can get a sense of what that might look like. All right. I always like to start with a check-in. I think it's helpful to get so we can get a sense of how everybody is feeling today. I also think a check-in is interesting. Our feelings check-ins are interesting because we get a big sense of like both and, I put in excited, but I also was a little sleepy this morning, so we can all be experiencing lots of different things at once. And sometimes it's helpful for our learners or for us, if we're working with colleagues, to just remember that we're not alone in whatever we're feeling on a particular day. Somebody else is probably feeling how we're feeling, which is always comforting. So let's do one more check-in. What's a goal you've set for yourself this summer? On your Mentimeter, it's going to say that I've changed the slide, and you can click go to slide and it'll move you forward. You can tell us a goal you've set for yourself this summer. Your goal could be sleep in, get lots of rest, do zero work. Or it could also be, that you want to learn something new or do some gardening. I have a personal goal to keep one plant alive. I don't have much of a green thumb. Ooh, organize. That's also on my goal list. I have been making a lot of Goodwill trips lately and reorganizing cabinets in my house. I find a lot of relaxation in organizing things. That's not true for all people. Ooh, one book a week. Whoever that is going to have to give us some book recommendations in the chat. I'm a reader too. Congrats, moving to a new house. That's exciting. Working out. That's a goal I have this summer. Getting up and walking my dog every day. Get that PD done by the end of June and take July off. I love it. Move into a new classroom. That's fun. Exciting. Take a break, relax. Make clay earrings. That's cool. I love to see what other people's interests and hobbies are. Always fun for me. Inspiring too. It helps me think of things I would like to learn. These are awesome. Thank you for sharing some of your goals for this summer. You want to share anything else? Now's the time. Keep putting those up there so we can celebrate you. Fresh veggies in the garden. I have a sibling that is a big gardener. They have all kinds of raised beds and grow all kinds of vegetables. That's awesome. Travel to a new place. That's always fun. Great time for travel. These are great. Thank you for sharing. Okay, keep that Mentimeter open on your device because we are going to come back to that tool. I want to get your feedback as we're moving through the session today. I also want to give you the gift of time because it is the summer. I don't think we'll be here the whole 2 hours. I want to make sure you feel like you've gotten what you needed from this session, but you also have the ability to get back out there and work on these goals you've set for yourself this summer. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen, switch back to a different screen, and we'll move forward. If you have questions or comments or feedback as we're moving through the session, I would love for you to put those in the chat. The more interactive this is, the more fun it is for everyone. So please feel free to tell us what you're thinking in the chat as we move forward with our time together today. So now that we've done a little check-in, I'll introduce myself. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about yourself as we get started together. My name is Jessica Herring Watson. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Teaching and Learning in the College of Education at UCA, and I'm excited to be learning with you. Before we get started, I'll just do a little plug for our online degree programs. I know someone said one of their goals was to excel in their graduate courses. They're already enrolled in a graduate program, which is awesome. Always a good day to learn something new. If you're interested in one of these online degree programs, we have a lot of different options and surely something to fit what you're looking for. in terms of continuing your education. So just know that these are available and we would love to learn with you at UCA. Today in this session, we're going to be talking about cultivating belonging in our learning spaces. Why is it important to cultivate belonging? And then what are some specific strategies we can use, whether we're supporting students in online environments or in face-to-face learning environments or some kind of hybrid in between? We want to make sure we're creating spaces of belonging so that our students can thrive and learn in our classrooms. So let's go back to that Mentimeter, and I want you to tell me why belonging matters. Why does it matter for our students to feel like they belong? Let me switch the slide for you. So in that Mentimeter, why does belonging matter? So you'll get a little notification to go to a new slide. Tell me what you think. You should still be able to see those results on the screen. These are great. Thank you. Keep those answers coming. You can submit more than one. So if you can think of multiple reasons why belonging matters, don't be afraid to put those out there and share with us. These are great. Yeah, belonging helps us feel safe. If you may have heard the term psychological safety. There's a researcher named Amy Edmondson who's done a lot of research into psychological safety. And that research shows that we can be more innovative, more creative, more committed to the team or the environment when we feel safe with that group of people. It can help us be more invested in the environment, which helps us to build that community in the classroom. Belonging is key to community. Helps our students feel more comfortable, and we know we're more open to learning when we feel safe. Learning involves some risk, right? We're putting ourselves out there to try something new, so we want to feel safe when we do that. They'll feel more receptive to things in the classroom, be able to learn more. Yes, building relationships is key. And that's all kinds of relationships, right? My relationship as the instructor with my students' relationships with one another, all of those different connections are really important in building a sense of belonging. Yeah, if everyone feels like they belong, then the whole group can be more creative and innovative. It makes a huge difference. If I don't feel safe, I'm not going to take any risks. Right? I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to keep to myself. I'm not going to put myself out there or try anything that might make me feel more unsafe than I already do. So really key to creating an environment that can be creative. Yeah, we all have an innate need to feel accepted for our identities, for who we are. That's so important. Yes, these are great. Thank you so much for sharing your thinking. So let's talk about, what does the research say? All of the answers that you all provided are right in line with what scholars have found about belonging. A sense of belonging has been shown to predict academic achievement. I can learn more in the classroom. Retention, I'm more likely to be both mentally present and physically present. I'm going to want to show up to class if I feel a sense of belonging. And persistence among students from all different backgrounds. So that ability to persist, I'm going to keep trying when things feel complicated or challenging to me. So important in the learning process. Belonging can predict all of these factors that are obviously things we want for our students. In online environments, there are specific challenges to persistence. So when we're in a physical space together, sometimes it can be a little easier to persist. But as you all know, probably you've spent some time in online environments in the last 2 years or so. It's really hard to be persistent in the learning process when you're on the other side of a computer screen and you're in charge of your own motivation. You don't have anyone else maybe around to support you. And so if we can cultivate belonging both through the way we're using online environments and through the way we're using our physical spaces, that can really counteract those challenges with persistence. So belonging is super important. You already know that. That's why you're here. You chose this session for a reason today. So I want to give you a framework to kind of think about belonging in your learning spaces. The Community of Inquiry framework was developed by Garrison, Anderson, and Archer a long time ago, 20 years ago, when it's hard to believe that was 20 years ago, when online learning environments were just starting to become more prevalent. So these researchers say, and I think this is a really valuable reflective framework that we can use as educators, that there are 3 types of presence in the classroom. There are 3 ways that we can show up. As the teacher, I have a teaching presence, right? So I show up in the classroom and I communicate with other students both by selecting content for them to learn and by setting the tone, setting the culture or the climate as the person in that learning space that is the teacher. So I'm going to say that one more time. That teaching presence, that's the space that I'm filling or you're filling as the instructor. I show up in this space both by selecting content for students to learn, providing structure and learning processes, and by modeling how I am hoping students will show up, right? So helping to develop a culture, set the tone, and maintain the climate. Obviously, we want to maintain a climate of belonging. So I play a really powerful role as the designer, but also as the facilitator. Then students and the teacher show up in terms of their social presence. So Garrison and his colleagues said that social presence is the ability of participants in a community of inquiry or a community of learning to project themselves socially and emotionally as full people, right? I can show up as my full person in this space. I can communicate in a way that shows both who I am socially and emotionally, and these people will accept that and support me. There's some modeling to be done here, and we're going to look at some examples of this in a moment. As the teacher, if I'm not showing up socially or emotionally as a real full person, I'm not modeling that that's what I want other students to do, right? So sometimes that can be a hard balance, a fine line to find. How much of myself as the instructor do I disclose so that I'm a real, full, whole person in this learning space with these kids? And I think we have to use some professional discernment there. It often depends on the age of your students, how much you want to show up in that space. But for example, I'm going to talk about my pets, right? This morning I talked to y'all about taking my dog for a walk, or I might talk about something, planting in my garden. Someone talked about planting their garden. Those are elements of my life outside of the classroom space that I can disclose and share to show, it's okay for all of us to share what's going on with us beyond the classroom. We want to all be able to show up in this space and share about ourselves. When we feel safe to show up as ourselves in the classroom, that then can support cognitive presence. Okay. So cognitive presence is the extent to which learners are able to construct and confirm meaning through reflection and communication with other people of the learning community. So if I feel like I can show up, be myself, I feel safe to share who I am, I'm a lot more likely to commit to the academic work that's going on in the classroom. Intuitively, this makes sense. But I think often we can forget that these different presences exist in the classroom space because we may find ourselves getting a little out of balance, right? We have a lot of pressure in the classroom toward academic rigor. And sometimes when I'm worried about the lack of time that I have to teach my standards, I might forget that I need to make space for that social presence if I really want students to excel in terms of their cognitive presence. So I think there's a ton of research that Garrison, Anderson, and Archer have done over the last 20 years to support the validity of this framework. But I think as a practitioner, it just helps me to be a more reflective decision maker. When I'm designing a lesson, I might stop and ask myself, is direct instruction the most valuable approach here? Or should I do a mini lesson so that I have more time for discussion about this topic that we're teaching, so that my students can think, pair, share, or work in a small group to have conversation where they're getting to know one another, building that social presence while also discussing the academic content, right? So just thinking about how we're creating time to build community, even as we're focused on meeting the academic standards of our discipline. So we can kind of use this community of inquiry to help us reflect on our practice, our instructional planning, and the way that we facilitate instruction with our students. So we can cultivate belonging, build that social presence and that teaching presence from the very beginning of the school year. We're going to talk about a couple of examples of ways you can cultivate belonging from the start. And then we'll talk about ways we can sustain belonging as we move through the year with our students. So let's start with from the start. One of the most powerful ways that we can cultivate belonging from the start is learning about students' lives with genuine interest and curiosity. So kind of taking it that step beyond just having them fill out an interest inventory. Maybe we start with that, but I do think it is really powerful and valuable when we reply to those interest inventories, right? So giving students feedback on what they've shared with us, even if that feedback is, thank you for being willing to share more about yourself with me, or to look for points of connection with students. You have two siblings. I have two siblings. That's so cool that we share that together. So demonstrating our genuine interest and curiosity by how we respond. The other thing I'm going to show you an example of is gaining students' insights and setting collective norms. So many of us use some set of expectations at the beginning of the year. We'll tell students these are the rules of my classroom or the expectations and procedures of this space. But many times students have some sense of the social norms of a classroom space and can provide their own insight into what might make that classroom space work well. So I'm going to show you some examples of what those look like. I start every course that I teach with the Google form. It asks students to share some basic information so that I can communicate with them throughout the year, like a preferred email. But the piece of the form that I'm going to share with you is really focused on building belonging. So I'm going to put this link in the chat so that you can look at this Google form. You're welcome to make a copy of this and edit your copy to fit your needs. And then you should also be able to see it on my screen now. Can you see a Google form on my screen? Cindy, you're my touch point because you have your camera on. I can see you nodding. Thanks. So there are a couple of things I want to talk about on this form. One is none of these questions are required. I don't want to force a student to disclose anything to me at the beginning of the year because I'm a new adult for them, right? They're not going to automatically, they don't have, I don't hold any expectation that they're going to automatically feel safe enough with me to share any of this information. So none of these are required. The other piece is I answer every question. So it's kind of small. I'll zoom in a little bit, but I provide an instructor response to everything that I ask students, because often we ask students to disclose things about themselves to us, but we may not be modeling what it looks like to do that, right? So if I just see a question on a page, share a fun fact, y'all, I'm the worst at fun facts. They're so hard for me to think of. But if my instructor shares a fun fact first, that kind of lowers the temperature for me for some reason. It makes me feel less nervous about putting myself out there. So I ask students to share their preferred name. And I work with college students. I ask students to share their pronouns if they're comfortable doing so. I invite that. But you know your teaching context best, so you decide what works for you in terms of sharing preferred names and things of that nature. I ask them, if you could take a class about anything, what would you take and why would you take it? And you could do this at any level. So I asked them in college because that's how old they are, but I used this same question when I worked with middle schoolers and when I worked with high schoolers, and middle schoolers come up with very interesting classes that they think they should be taking. I asked them to tell me something not academic that they're really proud of. So my example is that I learned to bake. When we were back in 2 years ago, when we were in that initial quarantine, I was really into baking, have stayed really into baking, and I'm really proud of that. That's something that I never made time for before that I really find a lot of joy in now. I asked them to describe a school assignment that they did really well on. And I asked them what they did that made them successful. So I think this is really valuable because I'm asking students from the beginning to focus on their assets. What are you great at? What are you bringing to the table? Sometimes students may enter our class with preconceived deficits within themselves about the particular topic. They may walk in with an "I'm bad at math" message that they've been telling themselves, or "I don't like to read" message, that this story that they've told themselves. And so helping students focus on their successes from the beginning can help them to think about how they can be successful in our classrooms. And then finally, I always ask students what I can do to help them be successful. Is there any difficulty or impediment that I need to know about so that I can better support you? And students are really honest here in what they share. They may share things related to their mental health. I've had students share about family medical issues that they know may pull them away from the class, or I've had students share that they're having a difficult time focusing in their courses because of other things that are going on in their lives. So creating that invitation from the beginning. You'll notice this is a Google form because students may not feel comfortable sharing this information with the whole class, but we have to build that sense of safety and belonging with us as the instructor, in addition to that larger classroom community. And so creating this space for students to share privately so that they can start to develop rapport with us can be a valuable step in building belonging. So this is just one example of how you might get to know students. Like I said, you have access to these slides and are welcome to use them or edit them if you want to make a copy. Can we see my slides still? Yes, thanks, Cindy. Another thing that I do at the beginning of the year is ask students to help me set the expectations of the class. And you might be thinking, well, that's great. You work with 20-somethings. But I did this when I worked with 6th graders and 7th graders, and they were awesome at it. I would ask them in the first days of school to help me build the expectations for our classroom space. And there's a sense of ownership whenever they are the ones setting the expectation. Often their expectations align with the same expectations that I would set if I were just telling them what those expectations were. So these are the 4 questions that I ask students when we get ready to set norms and expectations together. I ask them how they're feeling, just like I asked you how you were feeling when we got started, because I think it's helpful for students to not feel isolated in how they're feeling about a new semester, a new classroom, a new school year. I always ask them to share 3 awesome things about themselves, because I think it's helpful, again, to come back to that asset focused language. What are you bringing to this room? Maybe it's that you're funny, you're fun, you're good at telling jokes, you are focused, you're organized. What are the things you're bringing into this space so we can celebrate our collective awesomeness? And I'm going to show you what these look like in a moment. I asked them something they'd like to create, try, or learn in the class. This is really for me because I can build some things into my course schedule that meet those desires that students have about what they'd like to learn. Maybe I refocus an activity or change the way that I'm going to teach a particular lesson so that students can meet these goals. And then we set some expectations. I asked them, what are some expectations we should set for our time together? I do this in Mentimeter because it is anonymous. So students are much more comfortable at the start of the year sharing about themselves and sharing their desires for our norms if their name is not attached, right? Some students may not feel comfortable sharing in a way that's not anonymous when they don't know their classmates yet. And we do this activity in the very first weeks that we are working together. When we revisit these norms, because we do revisit them regularly throughout our time together, then students have built that base foundation of respect and rapport with one another in community. And they feel a lot more comfortable discussing these norms in just a regular classroom discussion. But I do think an anonymous tool can be really helpful at the start. So here's how their responses look. This is what their words to describe how they're feeling look a lot like yours did this morning. So often students are excited about a new school year or a new semester, but they're also feeling stressed and overwhelmed. So this creates an opportunity for dialogue. You know, we're all feeling a lot of complicated things as we start this new journey together. You're not alone in the things that you're feeling, and we can all be here to support one another as we move forward this semester. Then I asked them to share their awesomeness. What are some awesome things about you? Again, I think it's so interesting that our students often struggle to brag on themselves. They don't want to be perceived in any particular way when they're talking about themselves. So if I just ask them to say out loud, like, what's an awesome thing about you? Students might struggle more than if I just let them put it up there anonymously. And then they can see so many people in this room are caring people, identify themselves as caring and hardworking, as funny, and as a leader. So we share these collective qualities that we can bring to the class and really create a community where awesome things are going to happen. And then this is an example of the class norms that we set. So I asked students on Mentimeter, what are your expectations for our time together? They share that anonymously. And then I take that information and I condense, kind of bring together the big themes that come out from what they say they would like from our time together. So we do the Mentimeter at our very first class meeting. Then the second time that we meet, we pull up this slide and I ask students to review the norms that they created. And I also ask them to correct me if I have misunderstood what they wanted based on what they shared. So these don't stay static. We revisit these regularly every few weeks throughout our time together. And if they decide that something needs to change or that we're not living up to these norms, then we make a change, right? So making sure that our norms are dynamic, that they involve student voice at their center, and that we make it clear as the instructor, we are also accountable to these norms, right? So if you want us to be respectful of everyone's time, then as the instructor, I'm going to be respectful of your time. That's important for all of us to live up to that norm. They also want us to be respectful of everyone's experiences and ideas and everyone's opportunity to learn. I really love that one. And then I think they came up with some really powerful norms for our class community. They wanted everyone to listen, collaborate, help one another, withhold judgment, and practice caring. I thought those were just beautiful norms that they were able to come up with on their own. So this is a group of freshmen. These kids are 18, so not very far away from being high school seniors, the students that develop these norms. But like I said, I've been doing this activity for years, since early in my teaching career. So I've done it with 6th graders, 7th graders, 10th graders, and I'm always impressed with how willing students are to share their thinking when it comes to what makes a classroom community work and how they want everyone to show up so that they can feel a sense of safety and belonging. So I think inviting your students into the process of setting norms can be a really powerful way to build belonging, but it does have to be maintained, right? So we do need to revisit them. We do need to make it clear to students if we notice students not living up to these norms, that we bring that to the table and have a conversation about it, so that we all stay on the same page together. So that being said, let's move forward with our Mentimeter. I want to know some other ways we can cultivate belonging from the start. I know we've got some collective genius in this group this morning, so I want you to share what are some ways that you build belonging with your students, or some ideas you have based on what we've talked about together this morning. I'll put that Mentimeter link back in the chat in case you need it. Yeah, I think transparency goes a long way, no matter how old your students are. Being open and honest with students is really important. Play is such a great way to build community. Yeah, I love the idea of that optional Zoom session before classes start, just to talk, answer questions, give students space to kind of check you out, get to know you, see what they think. Be real and caring. I love that. Yes, I love that. Those accidental mistakes so kids can catch you. That's a great way to model productive failure too, right? Showing students we all make mistakes. And when we make mistakes, we recover from our mistakes. I think that's really powerful in building that progress over perfection narrative. Yeah, being realistic with expectations, modeling that flexibility, being involved so kids see you. Having those one-on-one meetings. I do a lot of one-on-one meetings in my classes too, just making it clear I'm available, um, and I'm here to talk if you need to talk. I think that's really helpful for students to know that you're present. These are great. Keep them coming. Give you a few more minutes to brainstorm, share some ideas here. Yeah, give students a chance to share good things at the beginning of class. That's a great one. Sets that positive tone. I like gratitude practices as well, asking students, what are you feeling grateful for today? Or what's bringing you joy? It's a really good way to help students remember what's bringing them up, even when maybe other things are trying to bring them down. Yes, recognize that everyone has bad days. Part of showing up as our real selves is extending some grace when our students show up as their real selves. And that's sometimes that means we're having a bad day. These are great. Thank you for sharing. We'll give it about one more minute if you want to post anything else here. This is a great curated list. When we get done with this session, I'll have Melissa send me the participant list and I'll send you a printout of these Mentimeter slides. So you have all of these responses. So you'll have my slides from today, and then I'll send you the Mentimeter slides as well. Yeah, giving students room to disagree with you, to make suggestions for improvement, really emphasizing agency and voice. And it's a great opportunity for us to talk to our students about, like, how do we use our voice in ways that are in line with our norms and values, right? If you're going to say we need to respect everyone, then I'm 100% open to your feedback, but please make sure you bring your feedback to me in a way that's constructive, right? Give me something I can do better. So really helping our students claim that agency and voice in a way that helps them to build skill towards providing feedback constructively and helpfully. I think that's awesome. I love these. Thank you. Okay, it's 10:45 and I believe in stretch breaks. So we're going to take one before we continue on our journey together. So it's 10:45 now. Let's take a little 10-minute bio break and then we'll start back at 10:55. If you want to turn your camera off, take a little breather. I'll see y'all in 10 minutes. I hope you had a nice little 10-minute stretch. Right before we took our break, we were talking about ways to build belonging from the start of our time with students. So now we're going to talk about ways we can continue to check in as we move through our time with students, whether that's a semester or a full year of school. So one of the things we already talked about was the importance of revisiting those collective norms. So being willing to, as many of you just mentioned on the Mentimeter, I love that this came up, Be flexible, right? Recognize when the norms that you set as a group are not working and consider how we might change those norms as a whole group. So, really maintaining that agency for everyone in the room by doing that collectively. You can distribute anonymous Google Form check-ins or have those one-on-one meetings with students if you've built that level of community where students feel comfortable fully engaging in those conversations. And then I really like a Mentimeter pulse check. So daily check-ins can be really helpful to start your time together. Some of you mentioned having students share their something good when they come in the room if they want to. Those little check-ins can be really helpful. I also ask students to give me feedback on the class. Somebody mentioned that on the Mentimeter. So I send midterm individual emails to students and ask them, I want to know on from your perspective as an individual, what can I do better? What's working for you that you think I should continue to do? And what are some things that I can do to help improve your learning experience? So let's talk a little bit about some check-in questions that can be helpful at the start of the class. So we talked about check-ins where we ask students for something good or involving a gratitude practice or sharing something that's bringing them joy. Some other check-ins that can help us focus on that asset-based language or growth mindset are things like this. What's something new that you learned this week? What's a goal that you've set for yourself this semester? So keeping students focused on their goals, goal setting, learning as a constant process rather than a product. You can also ask questions like, how did you overcome a challenge this week? I think that's really powerful when we help our students think about the way that they are managing hard things in their lives. Sometimes if we are always focusing on the something good or the gratitude, it can make students who are struggling to feel gratitude feel like they don't have anything to share. But if they're navigating challenging things, they are working to persist and overcome challenges. So really thinking about how we ask students to share about those challenges in ways that are focused on their growth can be really powerful. And then asking students, how can I support your learning this week? If I have students come into my room and I notice everyone is dragging, like we are just having a hard time, everyone looks tired, then I may start with, how can I support your learning this week? What can I do that's going to make your life feel a little bit easier so that you can really be present in our time together today instead of anxious and thinking about all of the other things that you need to do. Going back to that teaching presence from Garrison, Anderson, and Archer's framework, the community of inquiry model that we looked at the beginning of our time together, it's really important that we show up as a real person in our classes. So in an online space, or for many of you, you may be in person with students, but you also have a learning management system where students are turning in assignments, or an online portal where you're connecting with families. We want to make sure that we're showing up in that space as a real person too, not just in the physical space that we're sharing with our learners. So one way we could do this is by recording weekly intros or weekly overview videos so that families have a sense of what's going on in the class, or so that students can go back to that information if they're absent or they're having a hard time kind of keeping up with where they are. Having those weekly overview videos can be really powerful. I use Loom for this. Loom is one of my favorite tools. You can create a free account. They have tiered accounts. So there are a paid version and there's a free version. And the free version is excellent. Something that I like about Loom is that it is super easy to record your screen. So it's great for a weekly overview if you want to share some slides while you do that. I like to do assignment tours in my class. So if students have a big project coming up, I'll post a video where I'm just overviewing the instructions for that assignment and kind of talking them through the task. I also record overviews of rubrics. So if I want my students to self-assess for a big project, I'll record myself talking through, okay, when I get ready to score your assignment and give you feedback, This is what I'm going to be looking for in the rubric. This is what each line of this rubric means. What I like about Loom is that it's so fast, right? So some of those other screencasting tools can take a long time for videos to upload or download, and it's just maybe a little bit slower of a process. But with Loom, it's an add-on in Chrome, so I can record videos, and it literally takes the time of me recording the video. Super fast, super easy, great tool. Some tips for increasing teaching presence and social presence. First, include your face in the video, either through having like a little window in window where you're sharing your screen, but you're in the corner so they can see you, or by including an avatar. So using your Bitmoji or your Memoji, if you're an Apple user, is a really great way to increase your social presence. There's a lot of research about media comprehension that shows students are more likely to focus on the content in your video if you are in it, if they can hear your voice, if they can see you either as a face or a photo or an avatar. That helps students to focus on the content. So it's a really powerful way to build social presence and comprehension. Use a conversational, friendly tone. So a lot of times as teachers, we can get into this mode of feeling like it needs to be perfect. And when it's video, we have the opportunity to re-record as many times as we want to get it to exactly where we want it to be. But what I have found is that students are actually more receptive to those overview videos if I just do it in one take and I just leave in the mistakes. Because again, I'm showing I'm a real person. You know, sometimes I stumble over my words and I have to say, oh, sorry, I'm gonna try that again. Say that one more time. So really talking through your video like you're a real person, having a conversation with them about the assignment that you're overviewing or the things that students will be doing in class that week. So that kind of leads to that last point. Don't edit out mistakes. It can be, especially first, like I can be kind of a perfectionist at times. I want to put that in iMovie and take out those little mistakes so that it's just perfect, polished, finished product. But that's really not the purpose of these videos, right? The purpose is for students to see us and hear us and know we're on their team and we're here to help them. So just correct yourself and move on. Leave those little imperfections in there because it makes you feel more like a real person. Just like we should be showing up as real people, we want to create space for students to show up as real people in class. So some tools that I love for this that are free are Flipgrid and GroupMe. I'll put a disclaimer on GroupMe. That's a group chat tool. So I would only use that. I mean, encourage my college students to use it to connect with one another in class, but I would probably use different tools if I were working with K-12 students. So really think about what works for your students, their maturity level, their grade level, when we're thinking about whether or not we need to moderate those conversations to help them build capacity in building community with one another in ways that are respectful and appropriate to the classroom space. Both of these tools are free. Flipgrid is probably one of my favorite tools for building community and having discussion because students get to see each other in an online space. It can help them to build some of those reflective skills that we want them to have when we're talking about our learning. And it can be a great place for you to just post fun topics. What's your something good? Post your something good to Flipgrid so that we can all celebrate it. So great tool if you're in an online environment, a hybrid environment, or trying to capture some reflection in a face-to-face environment and be able to give students feedback without having to sit in on lots of different conversations all in that same physical classroom space. So a great way to maximize your time. Whatever tool you choose for creating space for students to show up as real people, really important to participate alongside students. So anytime I have students post to a discussion, I'm posting in that discussion as well, whether that's a traditional discussion board that's text-based or a Flipgrid discussion. If I want them to post a video, I'm going to post a video too. This goes back to holding ourselves to the same level of accountability as our students, but it also speaks to the importance of modeling how we want students to show up in the space. So if the norms we've set together say we're going to show up with kindness, we're going to value everyone's opinions and experiences, even if that means we're going to push back and share a differing opinion, I need to be modeling what that looks like so that students see what it is I'm looking for and how they show up with one another, right? So participating alongside students, modeling what we hope to see from students, really valuable. Whether we're hosting these conversations online in a tool like Flipgrid or in the physical classroom space through things like Socratic seminars or small group discussions, or even a think, pair, share, right? So modeling for students what those look like can be really helpful rather than holding an expectation that they know what those conversations look like or that they have participated in those kinds of conversations before they come to us. Okay, before we explore, we're going to go back to Mentimeter one more time. I just shared a couple of examples of how we can cultivate learning as we can, or cultivate belonging, I'm sorry, as we continue moving forward in the year. So now I'd love for you to share some more strategies. What are some other check-in strategies that you use to maintain community and belonging? So we build it from the start, but then we can't take it for granted. We have to continue to maintain and sustain the community and belonging that we build when we work with a new group of students. So what are some check-in strategies that you use, or maybe some you can think of based on the examples we've shared this morning? Ooh, I like that. A rose and a thorn from the weekend. I never heard it that way. I love that. I'll put that link back in the chat for you too if you need it again. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. I do the same, messaging students through the LMS to check in, ask how they're doing. A check-in to start each day. It's a great one. The rose and the thorn makes me think of, I always ask, or sometimes I'll ask students for a peak and a pit. What's your peak and your pit? Your mountaintop moment and then your really low moment. Oh, I love Fun Day Friday. That sounds fun. Take a few more minutes for people to add their check-in strategies. Oh, that's great. I love it. I do love the use of emojis. I think they can really help us talk about emotions that we're feeling in sometimes really powerful ways. A midweek check-in is a great idea. See how things are going, what students are feeling good about, or what they're worried about. We'll take 2 more minutes for people to share their check-in strategies. Oh, that's fun. I like that. A good, a bad, and a random thing about the day. That's fun. About 60 more seconds if anybody wants to add a check-in strategy to the Mentimeter. Okay, let's keep on moving then. Thank you for sharing those. So I wanted to share a Wakelet with you that has some resources. You can keep that Mentimeter open because we are going to go back there. So if you've got that Mentimeter open in a tab, hold on to it. Don't close it. We're going to do one more little check-in there on Menti. But I do want you to scan that QR code with your phone. It's going to take you to a Wakelet page. And you'll have editing access. So if you've got a device with a camera, any camera should be able to scan that, take you to the website. And on that Wakelet, you'll find some of the resources that we talked about today. Wakelet is just a curation tool. It's a way you can basically have a digital pin board. Some people may be familiar with Padlet, which is really similar. What I like about Wakelet is that it's free. And I love free digital tools. It's always very helpful to have. And I also like that you can collaborate on a Wakelet board, or you can make it view only. So if you wanted to share resources with your students, you could do that, or you could collaborate with your students to build a set of information on a Wakelet page. So this is set to be collaborative. You can add additional resources to this space if you've got other resources related to building belonging. But you can also access the resources that I have shared by clicking on them. There's some articles there that I'll show you are linked in these slides in just a couple of minutes. And then there's also some of the tools that we've talked about. Flipgrid and Bloom and other tools that we discussed this morning are also linked there. The Google form template that I shared is linked as well. So everything we've talked about is in that Wakelet for you to review. I would love for you to share some of your resources as well. We do our best learning in community. So I'd love for you to contribute your thinking and ideas and resources on that Wakelet. All right. So I'm going to move us forward one more time as we get close to the end of our time together. I told you I was going to honor your time today, give you the gift of time, and I'm going to do it. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen one more time. And we're going to go back to Mentimeter one more time. So if you'll go to your Mentimeter page, I would love to get some feedback on this session. I always like to close with a little reflection strategy. I use this with my students as well. So I want you to tell me what you liked, what you learned, what you'll try, and what you still wonder when it comes to cultivating belonging in our learning spaces. So you can take a minute to think through those questions, and then as you feel ready, share your reflections with us. You can answer any of those prompts that feel right to you. What did you like and learn? What do you wonder? What do you want to try? You need to carry forward. Awesome. I love Mentimeter. Great tool for crowdsourcing ideas. Yeah, totally agree. Once we build that sense of community, learning is a lot easier for everyone. Awesome. Yeah, I like an end of day check-in too. What was going well for you today? I think that can be really powerful. And I love a closing reflection strategy. I think it's really helpful to solidify that learning, right? If we don't give students that opportunity to think about, okay, well, like, how am I actually going to use this? What did I learn today? Sometimes the big ideas can get lost. Hmm. Yes, I love that. Being reminded to show up socially and emotionally. It's so easy to lose connection when we get caught up in the day to day and all of the little tasks that are so central to the academic part of teaching, right? We've got all these administrative things we need to get accomplished, but we got to be present with our students. Such an important thing to remember, and helps us to be more present with ourselves when we show up. Glad we're liking Mentimeter. Oh, good. I'm glad we're feeling good about Mentimeter. It's a fun one. It's a great tool. And Mentimeter 2 has a free version and a paid version, and you can do a lot with the free version. So, great place to start out, decide if it's something you want to invest in. But a really powerful tool for um, making that space for student voice, making sure everyone feels heard and is engaged in the learning process. These are great. Thank you. We'll take 2 more minutes if you want to share your reflection, what you liked and learned, what you'll try, and what you wonder. Take 2 more minutes with that before we move it forward into our last couple of slides. Hmm. Yeah, I'm loving this. Someone said, I wonder how to get my fellow teachers to buy in and be all there. I think that's really powerful. I also think one small step is really powerful, right? If the only thing that a teacher does is start by doing that Google form at the beginning and respond to students' answers, that's a great first step. Obviously, the consistent check-ins are going to be even more powerful, but I do think helping teachers see, it's just one little thing, maybe replace the student interest inventory you used to do with something that's a little more transactional, so that we have this back and forth rather than it being a static one-way communication. Anytime we can replace a one-way communication with two-way communication, we're going to build more opportunity for community, right? Students are learning about us and we're learning about them. These are awesome. Yeah, I think someone mentioned having variety in their check-ins. And I do think that variety is really important because we don't want students to be like, oh, she's asking me the same question again today, right? Making sure we're mixing it up, we're creating space for students to be their full selves and share what's challenging, what's good, funny things that are happening in their lives. Really providing that variety can be important. Glad we brought that to the surface here. Great stuff. Thank you so much for sharing your thinking with me today and engaging in this learning. I want to show you, I've linked a few articles about belonging. So for that person who said, I wonder, how can I get my colleagues engaged in this work? Sometimes we need to read a few things, we got to see what's all this belonging and community about. So these are some articles that you can share with colleagues or others that you work with related to the value and importance of belonging and community. I'll bring us back one more time to those online degree programs we have at UCA. If you're thinking maybe you want to engage in some of this work, we'd love to have you. And then I'll close with a thank you. It's been great to learn with all of you today. I have linked the slides in that QR code. So if you want to scan that code with your camera, you'll have access to these slides and the resources that are in them. Like I said, I'll have Melissa and Ashley send me a participant list for today, and I can send out those Mentimeter slides as well. So you'll have all those resources that we crowdsourced together, our collective brilliance this morning. And my email's here as well. I would love to connect with you after the session. If you have follow-up questions or you're just interested in this topic and want to reach out, it'd be great to chat with you. I think this is a really, really important part of our work with our students. If we don't start by building that foundation of belonging, it's a lot more difficult to do everything else we need to do in the classroom. So thank you so much for joining me this morning, spending some of your summer being a lifelong learner. I think it's awesome. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.